Hi, welcome everyone. It's good to see people coming in. We'll be starting in just a few moments. We have a pretty packed hour for you. So just a heads up, should we run over a little, we are recording. And if you have to jump off, if we do run over, we fully understand. You can catch up later on the recording. And if you want to stay on, we'd love that too. So welcome. We are excited to share more about Kōloa with everyone today. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes. Please feel free to type in the chat where you're logging on from. Yay. Okay. I wanted to make sure the chat's working okay too. Aloha. Oh, how fantastic. Wow. Okay. We've got people from all over the islands, as well as the continent, up to Canada. So cool. Oh, this is great. Yay. Okay, thanks for joining us. We've got some people from Kōloa. Aloha, Melissa. So glad you could be here. Wonderful. Okay, I think we're just about ready to get started. So I hope you enjoy the program. Just give it another half minute. Oh, we have people from all over Hawaii. Thanks so much for joining us today. Aloha. So, hello everyone. Welcome. My name is Andrea Nandoskar, and I'm the education. Oops, sorry about that. Just a second. I'm the Education Program Manager at Historic Hawai Foundation. I want to thank you for being with us this afternoon for an introduction to the multi-layered history of Kōloa Kauai, highlighting the recently released Kōloa Story Map, 5th in the HHF series. Today's program will receive an introduction to this place called Kōloa, learn about the Kōloa Field System and the growth of sugar and Kōloa Town, and take a short tour of the Kōloa Story Map's features and navigation. The creation of this story map was really made possible by our incredible program partners, and I want to thank them. We have Cultural Surveys Hawaii, Kōloa Community Association, Professor Puli Rosian Kauai Community College, Malama Maha Ulepu, Hui Malama o Kane o Luma, the Royal Order of Kamehameha I, Chapter 3, Kaumuali'i, and Kōloa Plantation Days. A big mahalo to all the program partners. Today's presentation is being recorded and it will be available within the next few days on HHF's YouTube channel. We'd be grateful if you would complete a brief survey at the end of the program to provide your feedback. For those new to Historic Hawai Foundation, we are a statewide nonprofit organization. This is our 50th year of helping people save historic places. And these are sites that tell the stories of the multi-layered history of Hawaii. We do this through education, advocacy, assistance, and protection of and for historic places. I would now like to introduce our speakers. Kamala Malama Ishii was born and raised in Kōloa, Kauai, and researched wahi pana, sacred sites, in the Ahupua'a of Kōloa last year as part of Kumu Puli'i Rosi's Hawaiian language class at Hawaii Community College. Kamala Malama is currently a student at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and she's majoring in Hawaiian language and education. Dr. Khalid Hamid, archaeologist and founder of Cultural Surveys Hawaii, has been active in the field of cultural resource management for over 50 years and has spent decades studying and documenting the Kōloa Field System. Dr. Hamid is a recipient of Historic Hawai Foundation's Frank Haynes Award for Lifetime Achievement. Ada Kuna is a local historian completing the soon-to-be-published Kōloa Plantation Days, a talk story. And Natalie Yokoi is the GIS Director for Cultural Surveys Hawaii, where she has contributed her expertise and passion for place as part of the project team for the past 4 HHF Story Map projects. I would now like to welcome Kamala Malama, who will help orient us to this place, Kōloa. Welcome, Kamala Malama.
Aloha. So, as Andrea said, I am Kamala Malama. I am actually from Kōloa, and if we could move on to the next slide. My first slide, it sort of helps paint this picture of how small Kōloa is compared to everywhere else, in my opinion. At first, we have the Hawaiian Islands, and you see Niihau and Kauai are highlighted with the orange. And then you further zoom in into Kauai, and you see that around that orange area is where Kōloa is. That is how small Kōloa is compared to the rest of Kauai. And that's just something that makes me so happy about being from Kōloa. And if you could move on to the next slide. This is a map from Kōloa back in 1985. And something about this map is like what I said, it's old, it's from 1985. The road that I actually grew up on or live in isn't on this map, which just it highlights how much things have changed within 30 years or so. And also, like, I want to highlight places that are very special to me in my childhood, like the Kōloa Jodo Mission, the First Hawaiian Bank. I'd see those every day. I used to go to Kōloa school when I was a child. So that's just how like historic Kōloa is. And if we could move on to the next slide. So as Andrea said, me and my class, along with the help of Kumupuali'ili, my Kalani, Rossi, we took it upon ourselves to research various wahi pana or famous places in Hawaiian culture that are in Kōloa. And what we would do with that information may be like facts, a story, possibly a mele, is that we would then translate it into both olelo Hawaii and then have the translations underneath it. And here underneath or on this slide, an example of work that we did with Maulili and Waikolo. And
Yeah, she's really interested in.
just to kind of summarize what is on this slide here, it basically says that Maulili is the water and Waikomo is also a stream, a very famous stream in the middle of Kōloa. And the fun fact about Maulili is that it means constant jealousy. And here, many gods and big figures in Hawaiian culture would visit this place, such as Kane, Kanaloa. They're some of the biggest gods in Hawaiian mo'olelo. Kawelo e Makua, also known as Kawelo more commonly, would also visit Maulili and Waikomo. And also, a lizard goddess would live here. Her name would be Kikafahine, and whenever her presence was known, the water would turn red, and that would be just a sign to like never go in that water whenever she was there. And some fun facts about Waikomo and other things is that, as I said, it's the main stream in Kōloa. It would pass from Maka to Makai. I would see it just a little bit past Sioka Store if people ever plan on visiting it somewhere in the future. And one last thing I want to bring about on this slide is Vaihanau. It is a rock on Maulili, and it has a song about it, hence the title of the story map. Aloha Vale Kapali o Kōloa, Keala Huli I ka Vaihanau. And then moving on to the next slide. Another Vahipana that we did a lot of research on is spouting horn. A lot of you may know it as spouting horn, but it also has two Hawaiian names. Puhi, which is the literal translation of blowhole or spouting, and Pukikai o Lavai, which translates to the sea gate of Lavai. I think it was named after the mo'olelo, which is on the storyboard map, where once upon long time ago, it used to be guarded by this giant lizard that would attack and even eat everyone who tried to use it, may it be for fishing, for swimming, whatsoever. Until one day, a man named Liko had enough, and he came up with this plan to trap the lizard. And he would do so by leading it on a wild goose hunt. And through this goose hunt, he would escape through a hole, which the lizard could not. And essentially, this spouting of the water is the mo'o crying and groaning in pain and hunger. And if we could move on to my last slide. In Hawaiian culture and in the olden times, places would be identified with wind names, rain names, or a special mountain or peak in the Ahupua'a. Koloa has many wind names, but the most common one that I see these days is Malanai. And the rain name is Noi. Hence, if you've ever heard the song Kaua Noi by Calho, that kind of connects the two. And to end off my part of the webinar, I wanted to leave it off with an olelo no iao, which I think highlights Koloa perfectly. Hulili kala I ke kula o makahu'ena, he huaka'i oi'o. When the sun vibrates through over the plain of Makahu'ena, a procession of ghosts is going through, and it's a saying used when the heat of the sun appears to vibrate, and this huaka'i'o being a procession of departed chiefs and their followers. When I first read this olelo no iao, I thought of it as Koloa being a sunny place, and also Makahu'ena is another name of Koloa's many wind names. So essentially, it's saying that Koloa is a very sunny place, and this sunny weather helps welcome everyone, from locals to people who live there, to the visitors, and even the departed, such as the chiefs and whoever else. And that is at the end of my webinar. I will now pass it on to Hal, who will talk about the field system.
Hello, everybody. My name's Hal Hammett, and I'm going to be talking about the Kōloa Field System. And I want to start with the first documentation of this field system that goes back to 1929, an archaeologist by the name of William Bennett, who worked for the Bishop Museum, who walked through the field system and described it as a series of innumerable walls, double walls of large stones on edge filled with small stones, walls built of blocks of lava set upright. He was obviously overwhelmed by the number of walls and all the complexity of it. But one thing he did recognize in his second statement about the double walls was that was his description of the water channels, or āwai, that we later recognized that is the backbone of the what we know today as the Kōloa Field System, although he did not at the time know the purpose of them. And also I want to mention, the Kōloa Field System is basically survived into the 20th century, basically because the land was so rocky, it was never put into sugar. Next slide. We go back 46 years to 1978, when Moana Corporation wanted to build a golf course called Kīohana Golf Course. And they presented their project to the Land Use Commission. And Francis Ching and I attended that commission hearing, pleaded for Moana Corporation to do an archaeological survey to document the incredible archaeological sites that were in the path of the pending golf course. Next slide. So we started our survey in 1978 for the Kīohana Golf Course. Many hundreds of acres. It was full of cactus and kohauli, very difficult to see and heavy grass, very difficult to see the ground, very rocky landscape. You had to be very careful walking through it, but we were able to document many of the sites through composite tape. There were no GPSs at the time. And we divided each one of the, we divided the entire property into grids with stakes at each grid, which corresponded to 11 by 17 graph paper. And we mapped each grid by hand with composite tape. Another feature of this project, next slide. Another feature of this project was the caves. And of course, the caves had another complexity, as documented by Francis Howarth of the Bishop Museum. It was the habitat of the endangered blind hunting spider, only known on Kauai and only known in the caves of Kōloa. For that reason, these caves have been preserved to this day. Next slide. So the original Kōloa Field System stretched from the east, the boundaries of Wele Ahupua'a, west to the boundaries of Hawaii Ahupua'a. Most of it, in fact, virtually all of it, in thick kohauli and cactus. Our particular project area associated with the Kīohana planned golf course was 460 acres. Next slide. It was a challenging task in this very heavily vegetated rocky landscape. Difficult to walk around. You couldn't see the ground underneath you, and you had to avoid the cactus. But we divided it into grids, 50 feet by 100 feet, and mapped each grid on 11 by 17 graph paper. Very arduous task, which took about 8 people, about 4 or 5 months. What we found was, next slide. What we found was very different from other irrigated systems in Hawaii. For example, the slide on the left, or the scene on the left, shows a typical irrigation system where the water flows from one field to the next, aggressively downslope. Another very common system of the wet valleys in Hawaii. There's an auai that is directed off of the stream to the edge of the valley, and the water is directed into the fields successively downslope towards the river. This system, next slide, is totally unique and different from all the others. The Hawaiians use these the rocky bluffs of this lava landscape and tried to keep the water along the edges of the bluff as high elevation as possible, as long as possible, running the āwai along each side of the bluff and irrigating the fields on either side downslope. Very ingenious system and unique in Hawaii, by the way. Next slide. So if you look at the entire pattern of the āwai, starting in Kōloa Town at Mauli'i stream, Mauli'i pond, that seems to be the original source of the water. One āwai becomes two, two becomes four, four becomes 8, and onwards, spreading out to the edges of the Ahupua'o in east and west, and extending all the way down to the coast, covering many, many hundreds of acres. Next slide. Another unique feature of this system was there were 2 aqueducts documented. The only aqueduct features known in the Hawaiian Islands anywhere. Kind of reminiscent of the Romans. The purpose of the aqueduct, of course, was to run the āwai as watertight as possible with rock structure, basically a stone bridge with the āwai running across the center to cross the low spot. We documented 2 of those in the field system. Next slide. If you look at the map, it looks like a very disorganized maze. The āwai is not in any particular pattern, of course, because this landscape is so rocky, so unpredictable, that the āwai had to follow the complexities of the landscape. And as we mapped the system, we realized there's a pattern to it. It's not just random. The āwais, obviously, as I said, the purpose was to keep the āwais as high as possible in elevation, as long as possible, and the fields adjacent to the āwai, and then off where the āwai could not reach are the dryland fields, the kula fields, and all the other land that was either too high or too rocky to deliver water to was used for the living platforms and the field shelters for the people who were actually working in these fields and maintaining them. Next slide. After much discussion with Moana Corporation and some argumentation, we proposed 5 preserve areas. And we chose those preserve areas because of uniqueness of the features or representational aspects of the field system. 2 of the most accessible ones are on Kiahona Plantation Drive, one right next to the clubhouse, and one up in the housing development, a little bit more Mauka. And it's open to the public, it's kept clear, it's maintained by the Kiahona Golf Course people, and there are 3 more on the west side as well. And I will mention in passing, the Kōloa Field System extended west on the west side of Poipu Road, and we have another very important preserve area in behind Prince Kuhio Park, which is maintained by the Royal Order of Kamehameha Kauamuali'i chapter. Next slide. I want to also particularly feature preserve area number 2, which is up in Mauka, up Kiahona Plantation Drive, in between all the housing developments. There's an āwai that runs through it, and a special feature, a unique feature, a the only heiau identified in the Kōloa Field System is preserved in this preserve area. And a very complex field system with the Hawai running through different fields and feeding fields on either side. Also, next slide, I want to mention it's not just irrigated agriculture with the fields. It's also a series of, the water was channeled into these very, very rocky, uneven areas, which were used for sweet potato production. Obviously, the lo'i were used for taro, but these areas that were too rocky to develop into lo'i were used for, the rocks were cleared, moved into mounds, and used to cultivate sweet potatoes. The general practice was, next slide. The general practice was to plant the sweet potatoes, put the rocks on top as kind of a mulch to keep the sweet potatoes, the young potatoes moist and watered and cool. And then when they're ready to harvest, you take the rocks off, you harvest the sweet potatoes, and you start over. The other aspect, the other features are very, very numerous field shelters. Obviously, these field shelters, we call them C-shapes today. The wall is on the northeast side, so people would sit inside the shelter, protect them from the frequent rains of Kōloa. And I remember the name of one of the rains is called Pe'epohaku, which very interestingly means hide behind a rock. Next slide. Probably one of the largest preserve areas is right next to the clubhouse, Kōloa Clubhouse, right on the Makai side. And there are 6 very prominent house platforms, many of which have fireplaces. Next slide. You can see on the left, one of the fireplaces, you can see the rectangular upright stones, and these would appear right in the middle of the platform. And we assume these were for warmth during cold days or winters, evenings, and also after the introduction of mosquitoes, a little smoke to keep the mosquitoes out of the house. On the right is a typical house platform, elevated 2 or 3 feet above the land, the larger rocks facing the edge, the smaller rocks in the center. Obviously, there would be matting, there would be a roof structure on the top, a thatched roof, and then matting on the top of the rocks for sleeping and living. Next slide. A question. Why did the Hawaiians choose this rocky, uneven landscape with thin soil and other challenges to develop a field system? Okay, well, and you compare it to other field systems in Hawaii, particularly one of the largest, Hanalei Valley, which had lots of flowing water, very level, even, predictable landscape to make lo'i one after another, very complex system. Also, something similar in Waimea. Why did the Hawaiians bother with Kōloa? I think the answer is, one of the advantages of Kōloa is you have lots more sunshine, and the taro would mature much quicker than in these wet valleys. Next slide. The Hawaiians also had to deal with thin soil over bedrock, which led to lots of challenges because hey, you can't grow anything unless you have soil. You can't grow things on rock. But the Hawaiians overcame that disadvantage by constructing the aowais and then using the aowais to deliver the soil to the rocky landscape. And the reason we know this is because we did cross sections of the aowais and found that the aowais were much deeper than they looked, and they had 2 or 3 or 4 feet layer of soil in them along the bottom and the sides. Obviously, we think that the Hawaiians agitated the soil mauka, deliberately putting them into mudding the water in the aowais to deliver the soil into the fields of the Kōloa Field System, and also to seal the edges and the bottom of the aowais. Very ingenious system. The other aspect of it is many of the other field systems in Hawaii in the wet valleys were susceptible to periodic floods, disastrous floods which would ruin the crops. Kōloa Field System did not have that disadvantage at all, because it was very easy to turn off the water from the aowai in a rocky landscape which is not susceptible to flooding. Okay, now next slide. Finally, we get to the question of, this really complex, very intricate and ingenious system spread over hundreds and hundreds of acres, all the way to either side of the Ahupua'a boundaries. The question arises, how is it designed? How is it laid out? How is it constructed? And perhaps most importantly, how is it managed? This obviously implies a very high degree of cooperation and a very organized community with very well-defined roles for individuals. And today, I still wonder, and for the rest of my life, I will wonder, how is the system conceived and how is it built? How is it designed? How is it built? What plans were used? Because it's so intricate and it's so integrated into the fine details of this landscape that there had to be some very, very sophisticated management system to construct this field system. Okay, next slide. Fortunately, this land was too rocky and uneven for plantation agriculture, which is why it's preserved today. And the Hawaiians used these very characteristics to their advantage, using the rocks very advantageously to line the fields, to channel the water, to make mounds for sweet potatoes and other uses. In other words, turning a disadvantage into an advantage. I think that could be a lesson for us today. And I want to say thank you very much. Next slide. I want to say thank you very much. And I've learned a lot from documenting this field system over many years, starting all the way back in 1978. And also, I encourage people to visit one or more of the 5 preserve areas that we've designated, actually 6 if you include the one above Prince Ku'io Park, and experience the brilliance and the genius of the Hawaiians in laying out this intricate and wonderful system. thank you very much, and now I want to turn this over to Ada Puna. Thank you.
Okay. Several years ago, Phyllis Kunimura, the mother of the Kōloa Plantation Days celebration, and Melissa McFerrin Warwick, the festival's activities coordinator, asked me to write a book about Kōloa Plantation Days. The object was to remind the locals and visitors what this celebration is all about. In other words, why do we celebrate? After 150 years of sugar, the Hawaiian Sugar Planters Association decided to build a monument to sugar, and since Kōloa Sugar was the first successful sugar plantation in Hawaii, they decided to build it as you enter Kōloa Town from the tunnel of trees. When finished, they then decided to have a sesquicentennial celebration, and complete with a parade and a luau. It was so successful that Governor Ariyoshi, who attended the festivities, told the organizers they must do this again. And they did. So with the exception of a couple of years, they continued for the next 50 years. The tree where the remnants of the third mill still stands was planted by Mrs. Ariyoshi and is known as the millionth tree of aloha. By the time I got involved, the Kōloa Plantation Days Committee had already interviewed 20 committee members, and they asked them about what life was like growing up on and living on a plantation. What were their homes like? What did they do for fun? After the interviews were transcribed, it became apparent that these people were lunas and bosses and upper class, and most did not get their hands dirty. I set about finding the field laborers. This book is called Kōloa Plantation Days, a tale of sugar cultivation and community on Kauai. Talk story by Ada Puna with Melissa McFerrin Warwick. It's expected to be published the next Kōloa Plantation Days in July of 2025. You'll read about how to order in the Garden Island beforehand. It has 20 chapters, many historical photos, and 75 Kōloa folks who agreed to be interviewed. This is their story. As the plantations grew, so did the need to import workers. They came from all over the world: Japan, Korea, China, the Philippines, Puerto Rico, Portugal, Spain, and other parts of Europe. Initially, they all told of coming to Kauai and being supplied with housing and plantation camps. It was a divining experience who came to, grew up in and around Kōloa Plantation. Initially, Land Company built a holly pili, thatched-roof houses for the Kanaka workers, and William Hooper, part owner and plantation manager. When the unmarried Chinese immigrants first arrived in Kōloa in the 1850s, they were housed in long wooden houses. There was a kitchen, and the outhouse was in the back. There was also a plot of land on which the workers could raise their vegetables. As immigrants arrived, they lived in camps named after the jobs they did in other ethnicities. There was the Haole or Caucasian camp, and the homes of the Luna supervisors and overseers on the Mauka mountainside of Waila'au Road. The Spanish camp was north of the Haole camp, stable camp for the dairy and horse and mule corral workers on the east side of Waila'au, and as it turned south. There was also the Portuguese camp, Japanese camp, Korean camp, new mill camp for mill workers, with south was the last mill. In 1900, the workday was well established and marked by whistles and sirens that announced the start and the close of the workday, or pauhana. The first whistle would sound at 5 a.m. The Luna would go through the camps yelling, "Hana, Hana, work, work." Work started as the sun rose at 6 a.m. There was a half an hour lunch break at 11:30, and then work resumed at 4 p.m. in the fields and longer in the mill. Laborers worked in gangs, preparing the seed and planting, weeding, irrigating, spraying, burning the sugarcane, and prepping for harvest. Sometimes the gangs consisted of the same ethnic groups, but because it became mixed as a common language developed known as Pidgin English. By 1915, the average wage was 78 cents a day for a Japanese hired hand. His wife would get 55 cents a day for the same type of work if she worked on the plantation. People I talked to gladly told the stories of how their ancestors or relatives came to Kauai. One such lady is Charlene Andrade Balmoras, a fifth-generation Andrade. She is known as the rancher's daughter, as the men on both sides of the family eventually went into ranching. My family on my father's side came from the islands off Portugal, the Azores, São Miguel. They left their native lands of the Atlantic, and they traveled for 6 months by boat for the Hawaiian islands of the Pacific. In the 1800s, plantations that operated there were booming, and they were seeking laborers. My grandfather's great-grandfather, Jose Andrade, rounded up his immediate family and traveled to the other side of the world because he believed in the economic opportunities that these plantations promised. He was willing to work hard in his new country to ensure that these financial dreams would come true. Later, in the early 1900s, my family on my mother's side came from the islands off Spain. They had the same hopes and dreams. Their families lived down by the port. They were fishermen, and I think that they would grow crops and take them to town. They were more like country people. Suddenly, this boat came, and they heard there was a possibility they could go to work. So they packed up everything they could, left the family behind, and got on a boat to have a better life and more opportunities somewhere. That's how they went there. My grandfather, Alphonse Martin, worked for Kōloa Plantation. Mary Moraney Cook was born in Kōloa at the Plantation Hospital and Dispensary. Later, Mary and her husband, Sam Cook, dedicated the energy and talents to the Manoa Heritage Center on Oahu and the Malama Manoa, which they also founded in the 1990s. She talks about how her grandparents arrived on the island. My grandfather, Joseph Hughes Moraney, was from Alabama, and he graduated from Auburn State with a degree in civil engineering. In 1898, he had signed up to fight with Teddy Roosevelt's Rough Riders in the Spanish-American War being fought in the Philippines. When he got as far as Hawaii, the war ended, and he stayed. He married Mary Chambers, who was from Scotland, and she was visiting her brother, who was working on one of the plantations. My dad, William Middleton Moraney Sr., was born in Hilo, Hawaii. My grandfather eventually got a job as a civil engineer for the county of Hawaii. One of his main tasks was to pave the roads from āina to Mana, beginning in 1910 and finishing in 1920. He also designed and built several bridges, namely the covered bridge on the National Register, which leads from Honolulu to Honolulu from Princeville. Mercedes or Mercy Aquino Ramata was born on Kauai, October 1931. She grew up in the Filipino camp in New Mill Camp near the train house and had this to say about her family. My parents, M. Carino and Clara Unde Aquino, arrived at the old Kōloa landing, later called Seven Seas, on Kauai in January 1923. They came as a young couple. Dad was 19 and Mom was 17. They came on a boat with other Filipinos from the Philippines when the sugar plantations were asking Filipinos to come over to work. My parents first lived at Mahaulepu, near the bottom of the Haupu or Hori Mountains. They later moved, before I was born, to a new mill camp near the train house, and sugar mill across from the Japanese camp. We were from the Filipino camp. There were 12 children in our family, 6 boys and 6 girls. My oldest brother, Benjamin, was born in Mahaulepu on October of 1924, weighing 2 pounds. He was kept in a shoebox with a vinegar bottle filled with warm water, liken it to an incubator. Food and water were heated over a wooden fire and later kerosene. I'm not sure if there was a doctor involved with Benjamin's birth. During those times, we were usually delivered with the help of a midwife. Mamo Kaneshiro reminds us that the aloha of the Hawaiian people made this all possible. I love America, and I love the Hawaiian people because we are all immigrants. Every time I look at the Hawaiian people, I am thankful because they shared the land with us. That's why we have 11 acres of land in Omaha, and some of my family have more, and they are there because of the Hawaiian people. Hawaiians also staffed the first plantation, and the grandson of Hawaiian Kapamoke tells this story. Daniel Kapamoke Jr. is the grandson of Kapamoke, a brakeman for the Paolo. For 16 years and locomotive driver for 43 years, Daniel speaks very affectionately of his grandfather. Kapa Kekeo Kalani Moke was my grandfather. He was born in Kōloa in 1886. He worked for Kōloa Sugar Company and then Grove Farm. He quit school when he was 16 and went to work as a mule driver. 2 years later, he trained to be a brakeman on the locomotive Paolo. Whenever they approached a downgrade, Kapamoke's job was to run alongside the train and pull the brake bar on each of the cane cars. Once they neared the bottom of the grade, he ran alongside, releasing the brakes. He also was responsible for keeping the boilers filled, which he did at the reservoir with a water bucket. In 1909, he was promoted to engineer after 5 years, a position he held for 40 years, retiring in 1952. He was a big man, and the story is told that one of his cars derailed. He lifted the whole thing back on the tracks. He was a soft-spoken Hawaiian, and I still think of him as the gentle giant. I slept in the same bed as Grandpa when I was a kid, and I remember him strumming on his guitar, playing Hawaiian slack key until I fell asleep. So there are many stories like this in the book, and I hope that you'll be able to get a copy when it comes out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ada. Michelle can stop her screen share now.
Okay. Aloha mai kākou. My name is Natalie Ukoi. I'm from Kailua on the island of Oahu. I work as the GIS director for Cultural Surveys Hawaii under Dr. Hal Hammett. I've been fortunate to partner in a few story maps now with HHF, and I'm happy to join you today. So mahalo for having me. I'm here to introduce the Kōloa Story Map and spend a little bit of time navigating through it so you can see some of the functions and the way that you can interact with the story map. I'll be showing you how to best interact with the story map on a desktop, but you are able to access it from either a phone or a tablet as well. So first off, ArcGIS Story Maps or Story Maps is an online platform, and it's designed for digital storytelling. So it allows us to weave together maps with all other kinds of media like photos and videos, auto recordings to create this shareable narrative. So this story map of Kōloa opens with the title, Aloha Wali Kapani o Kōloa, Ke Alo Huli Waihana, the course of history through the life-giving waters of Kōloa. And this title comes from a mele and a Hawaiian game, Ko'i, and it really inspired the way we wanted to share some of the stories of Kōloa. it's just another clear example of how water really shapes a place. And so that waihano, that sort of birthing or life-giving water of Kōloa, is central to its history, as Kamaʻalama, Hal, and Ada all spoke to in the mo'olelo and the place names, the formation of the field systems, and in the making of historic Kōloa Town. And so there's also a historic photograph here, which places us at the point of Ka'ulala, and you can see Koi'ula Harbor area. Looking into Kōloa Ahupua'a, you can see Waita Reservoir in the back there and the various pu'u and ridges that surround Kōloa. The story then goes into a little more detail, sharing about you know, why this map came to be and who was also involved in the making of the map. Just some other notes here. The story map is divided into kind of 4 sections here. And they're all clickable headings that allow you to sort of navigate through each of the sections of the map. So you could click to one here and it will jump to that section. And you can always click up to the top to jump back to the beginning of the story map. So just so you know, it's navigatable that way. So the sections will be na wahi pana o Kōloa, the Kōloa Field System itself, taking us through a history and tour of historic Kōloa Town, and then finally more about the people and community of Kōloa itself. And so here, starting with na wahi pana o Kōloa, or storied places of Kōloa, it opens with a map featuring some wahi pana or place names within and around or connected to the ahupua'a of Kōloa. And so this map kind of invites users to orient and familiarize themselves with the place of Kōloa and learn more about some of the wahi pana of this place. And so it's a sort of 3D oblique view that you can play around with. And I'll go over some of those functions now. You can see here there's a legend which has symbols describing everything that's shown on the map. And there's a couple ways that you can play around with the map. You can use your mouse, of course, to kind of drag through and scroll. This first button here just orients you north up. This button here allows you to move and orient, hold down the mouse and kind of change the perspective of the map itself, along with this one to toggle along. If you were in Kōloa, you could use your location to locate yourself. So we are not in Kōloa, so when I use this button, it takes us all the way to Kailua, which we are. But if you ever get lost within the map, you can always click home and it'll take you right back to the original orientation of the map. You can also zoom in and out using these buttons. One other nice feature is you can use the search bar here. So let's say you're interested in Suioka store and its location relative to place names on the map. It'll start showing up. So you could click Suioka, you can enter an address or a place. It kind of works like Google. And you can reorient the map here. Sorry about that. Reorient the map. Oh. One moment. Like so. And then you can zoom in to see that Suioka store, this point here is near Waikomo Stream. And so that's just a couple different ways that you can use that map here. Then it goes into some of the featured wahi pana. So most of these place names and descriptions are taken from the Holo Holo Kōloa Corridor Management Plan. And then also contributions from students in Kumupoli's class, including Kamaʻalama, as you heard earlier. So anytime you see this tip, you can it gives you some extra direction. So here it's saying you can click any of these links to go directly to that site. So Kamaʻalama told us a little bit about Maulili, and Waikomo. So here is her Hawaiian description here with English translation. But you can scroll through this map and it takes you through the description of each place. At the end of each section, there's a link here that will always take you back up to the top to that main menu. So again, you can scroll through and learn about a bunch of the different places for Kōloa. One area I would like to feature specifically is Kaneoluma Heiau. Hui Malama o Kaneoluma was gracious enough to contribute to this map as well. So this section is especially has extra information here, maps from the great Henry Kikohuna, recording this heiau and some information about that, going into the different sections. Again, anytime you see this kind of link here, it's taking you out to access this document here. So within the story map, there are a bunch of links to look out for as you go through as well. So again, this is just taking you through the map, giving you an overview and what this area is highlighting here. And again, once you reach the bottom of the section, you can always orient yourself back to the top. We are going to go to the end of this section and take us to the next part of the story map, which is the field system. So the next section is Kōloa Field System, and it features a narrative from archaeologist Dr. Hal Hammett about what the field system is, how it came to be, and what is there now based on his time and experiences in Kōloa from 1970s to kind of give context to what we see today. Again, a lot of it is what he shared with us, but it'll just go into a little more detail that he's helped me build into this story map. So it just takes us through the timeline of the formation of the field system, highlighting various elements and details within. Again, whenever you see this sort of tip text here, it'll give you some instructions. So here, Hal is sharing through audio recordings some of his experience, either explaining different elements or what he was experiencing and seeing and documenting at the time. So it's a really nice way to interact, not only visually, but to hear those stories told from Dr. Hammett as well. So we can continue to scroll through. One other thing here that changes. So again, this is another map background section that allows you to kind of navigate it in the way that the pana section was. So here it's just showing you the extent of the field system. But one thing I'd like to point out are these links here also clickable. So this just describes here that you can see sort of what the distribution was of the agricultural sites within the field system. Likewise, you can see how habitation sites were distributed. And then lastly, look at the effects of commercial sugar, which Hal also touched on in his presentation, along with the audio recording of that in more detail as well. So that, and then it goes into a little more detail about his physical experience there. So introduction of the project, how they documented in a little more detail, and sharing some of his personal photos from that time as well. So, and then lastly, bringing us into kind of what we're seeing today. Again, a background map section that you can interact in the same way. And just giving a little more detail about how these preserved areas came to be. And then lastly, one little tribute to the late Ted Blake, which how Dr. Hammett worked closely with him to do a lot of this work in Kōloa. He's from a longtime Kōloa family. This is a map from his great-great-grandfather. And you can see his perspective of Kōloa in a time of as early as the 1880s to the late 1930s. And then some of the work that he and Ted Blake did together in Kōloa. So with that, we are brought into sort of another history, taken further through to the history of historic Kōloa Town, as told by historian Ada Kuna. One quick tip, if you are using this on a mobile device in Kōloa, this link here allows you to navigate straight to that walking tour, which I'll cover in just a little bit. But just going back up to this Kōloa Town, Ada's narrative takes us through some key historic points that really shaped the making of Kōloa Town. So she takes us through that history there. Also features some really nice illustrations from the artist Ramsey, 1985 drawings, this one depicting all the building fronts along Kōloa Road. Okay, so this is the virtual walking tour. If you're looking at a desktop, you can experience it virtually with us now. If you were in Kōloa, you can use it to navigate your way around. And so the components of this tour is each site has some description, mostly sourced from that Holo Holo Scenic Bypass document. There's a little map here that is limited on the desktop version, but on the mobile will allow you to see your location in relationship to this map. But here you can use it to zoom in and see the other sites. And then as you scroll down, it'll take you through the other sites. One nice thing too, there are pictures, so you can use this tab as well to scroll through here. So you can see a comparison drawing of the Tau building and an illustration from that Ramsey artistic drawing. And so it will take you through. You can also use this map to sort of skip further down the story map or the story tour and take you through the different scenic historic places within Kōloa and familiarize yourself. So, and then also just appreciate some of the amazing historic photos, you know, seeing things from a different perspective here. So lots to view in there. And then taken back to a continuation of Ada's narration, she goes into a little more about the Hawaii Sugar Planters Association, which also carries us into our last sort of section of the story map, featuring some of the people and community groups of Kōloa. So in this first sort of iteration of the story map, it was launched during Kōloa Plantation Days, which is a major annual event celebrating the history of Kōloa and Kōloa Town. And so here are details for that event and some photos from past events there. Kauai Historical Society also contributing greatly historic photos to this story map, and then you can learn more about them and also see their website and view some of their archival collections as well. Hui Malama o Kaneolauma provided this graphic of all the work that they do down at the Heiau, and also linking to their site as well to learn more. The Royal Order of Kamehameha, Chapter 3, Komoali'i, and all their work that they do at Prince Kuhio Memorial Park. Here there's a photo featuring their annual Prince Kuhio ceremony and celebrations, and then also a video here that was produced by an 8th and 9th grade students as part of the Kamalo Ula Student Leadership Project. And then the last community group we featured here was Malama Mahaulepu, and it features an interview with one of the co-founders, Napua Wong, who was graciously shared her personal photos with us, as well as her story, which you can read here in Interview Done. And the homemade flyer that they made documenting how they started all those years ago. So another really awesome resource and story to dive into. And so it ends here with a stylized drawn map of Kōloa Town. And then, of course, a thank you to all of those who partnered in creating this story map. And so this isn't everything. This map is a living space, and it can continue to grow and change and improve. For now, we hope it invites you to learn about Kōloa, or maybe strengthening your connection to Kōloa in another way. But I'd just like to mahalo all of those of you who are from or who love this place of Kōloa and have shared so openly in making this story map. So mahalo for having me.
Oh, mahalo nui loa, Natalie. Wow. Thank you, everyone. Mahalo nui loa to Kamala. Everyone could come on. You can put your cameras on so everyone can see who's part of the panelists. Just a big mahalo to Kamala Malama, Dr. Hammett, known as Hal to many of us, Ada and Natalie. Thank you so much for sharing your mana'a with us this afternoon. It was a fabulous journey. I'm truly so inspired by you all and grateful to you and all of our project partners for the time you've devoted to creating this incredible story map. And I love the additions Natalie has added recently, the interviews and images with Dr. Hammett. So I'm looking forward to diving into those. To our audience, thank you so much for joining us. Mahalo. We hope you enjoyed this peek into this beautiful and special, unique place, Kōloa, and hope that you use and share the Kōloa Story Map. I'd like to mahalo my colleagues, Adele Balderston, who is a member of the Kōloa Story Map project team, and Michelle Kisek, who's been providing amazing technical support for today's program. Mahalo to you both. I just want to say that our next webinar is very different. Well, not so very different, actually. It's on archaeology. But it's a technical preservation training. It's called Archaeological Investigations and Their Role in Preservation. It will be on December 11th. It's available on our website, historichohawaii.org. You can register. Also encourage you to sign up for the e-newsletter. So you receive notices about these types of programs, not just ours, but partners and other preservation organizations. And I hope that you continue to engage with Historic Hawaiii and you help support places that you care about. And really want to wish everyone a wonderful rest of your day. A reminder to please take the survey at the end. And a few people had questions specifically for Hal. We've collected those and we will be sharing those with everyone in the follow-up email, probably later this week or early next week, along with the recording. So with that, mahalo nui loa, wishing everyone, you and your loved ones, the best, and a hui ho.